So again, welcome to our second class. Thank you for a number of you stayed on last week just for a conversation, which was really good, following up on our first class. But for, again, those who might be watching, I'm Sue Collar, the pastor of First Presbyterian Church, and Bill Mishner, wave Bill, the executive director of the Lighthouse, is leading our class for us today. And if anybody missed the first class, they can go ahead and watch that or review it. I find it sometimes helpful to review things. It's on our website. And I guess there's nothing more to say except, Bill, we can hardly wait to see what comes next and what else we learned today and what else it makes us think about. So I turn it over to you.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to jump in right away since sorry about last week. I wasn't feeling very well and wanted to give you my best. This is something I really love and I'm passionate about. So last week or 2 weeks ago, I gave you a little homework. And so we're going to see how well you remembered what those boxes were in the social discipline window. So I need those 4 boxes. What are they?
2.
Who said that? Sally, did you say 2?
I said 2.
Yes, 2 is one of them.
Not.
4.
With and 4, yep. 2 not, with and 4. So clearly the one that we're trying to get to most often is that with box. Part of your homework was to talk about or think about what you were navigating and how you were navigating those boxes on a daily basis when you were talking to people or interacting with others. So I know you didn't get, I don't think you got much into that. Probably won't dive real deep into that. We will be going back to the boxes today, but if somebody would like to share, just one person maybe share how they may have navigated that, because being aware of those boxes and how we navigate that social discipline window is very important on us being cognizant on being in the restorative box, which is the with box. Does anybody want to share with me?
They're so shy.
They are.
Well, I found
so my son, who said?
That was Sally.
No, I just said I
Sally.
found myself starting out with the sort of, in my mind, I was throwing up my hands in a situation. I didn't throw up my hands, but in my mind, I was saying, I'm not going to deal with this. But then I was able to just, I think what you said was take a step back and wait, which is always a good idea for me because sometimes I jump in and say things when I shouldn't. And that was really helpful. So I managed to get through it all, but it was just, I couldn't believe what had been said. And so I threw up my hands and then I thought, no, listen. This is one of those things that you've been talking about. So it works if you.
So well, and Sally, you took it from a reaction, which is what you wanted to just jump in and do, and turned it into a response by taking a step back or that breath, whatever you want to do. That's what we need to do is we need to respond to situations rather than react. Because again, reactions have emotions involved, and when our emotions are involved, we're going to make the wrong decisions. So good job, Sally. And that's exactly what I'm talking about is when we can catch ourselves and make it a conscious effort, that's when we can start navigating these better and being more conscious of, I want you to come along with me rather than me doing it to you or responding like I don't care. So I appreciate that. Let's go to share screen, and I want to share my PowerPoint so we can get started this evening. My son knows restorative so well because we use it at home often. And so oftentimes when he does not want to respond in a way that we can do things together, I will ask him what box he wants me to be in. And so I just remind him, I'm trying to get us in the with box. Do you need me in the 2 for now? Or can we do this together? And it's really funny how he snaps out of it to say, no, I want to talk about this. Or he'll take a little time out, go to his room, come out a couple minutes later and say, okay, I'm in a better place to be able to do this. So again, taking that step back or taking that breath really does help. So we're going to talk about the fundamental hypothesis. And so really when we're talking about when we're using restorative practices, people are more likely to do things, be more productive, cooperative, and they're going to walk away just happier if we're doing it with them rather than to them, for them, and not at all. So that's really the fundamental hypothesis. Mm-hmm. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to develop a community that manages that conflict and tensions by repairing harm and restoring relationships. Now that's just a general thought behind it, because when we think of harm, we think of levels, right? So a lot of times it's like, well, I didn't really harm them. The thing is, though, when we get into any conflict and a disagreement, there is harm there. And if we don't address that harm, it's like sweeping stuff under a rug and thinking that now it's under the rug, I don't need to deal with it. Sooner or later, you're going to sweep enough stuff under that rug that there's going to be a huge bubble and you're going to start tripping over it. So the idea is if we handle the harm that's caused immediately together, then we don't have to worry about tripping over it later in life or later in our relationships. Here's a thought-provoking question for you. Do you think God is retributive or restorative? Do you think God puts things in our path for us to go through our trials alone? Or is God walking with us every step of the way? So, one of my favorite verses is, gosh darn it. It's about walking with God. It's a poem. I even gave it to my dad for when he was in the hospital.
Footprints and
what's that? Footprints. Thank you. Who said that?
Terry.
Terry, you are the bomb. Footprints, and it talks, of course, about me and my journey actually early on with God, because I was very angry because I lost both of my parents after I made a turnaround in my life and really wanted to participate in a different way. But I thought about it, and my walk with God was just like that. I got angry at God because I only saw those one set of footprints. And that is how I thought of my father and all that stuff, is God at times has to carry us rather than walk beside us because we're not strong enough to do that. So I believe God is restorative. I believe that the things that go through are because of choices that we make, and then oftentimes we think it's retributive. And in my eyes, though, I believe God is restorative because he wants to do things with us at all times. And so when I ask people, even when we have to give consequences in life, because sometimes consequences have to happen in any relationship that we have, how are we going to get to that consequence that is fair and restorative? Are we doing it, or are we involving the other person that caused the harm in the first place? If we can get that to happen, we really need to have people involved that caused the harm. So when you guys first read that, did you immediately think one way or the other when it came to retributive or restorative? When it comes to God?
Restorative.
Just out of curiosity.
It was my first thought.
You know, and it's interesting because I found myself going both ways. As a person of faith and a pastor, you know, a theologian, I lean towards the restorative. But the reality is there are times in Scripture where God comes across as very retributive. And I've kind of put that in context as I've studied this over the years, and Bill, you hit upon it, is there's a difference between being retributive and having consequences. And I think sometimes we look at those as one and the same. We're dealing with the consequences of our actions or someone else's actions, and we may blame God for that. But just because we blame God doesn't mean it is God. I think we do have a God who walks with us and doesn't do things to us, but we don't always experience it that way.
Yeah, the counseling side of me, anger is a very interesting thing in humans. And when we get to that level of anger, we like to point fingers and blame, and we've got to have somebody to assign it to. And unfortunately, God becomes one of those people that is kind of a catch-all for a lot of our anger because we don't know how to navigate and manage through that. As you continue to walk your restorative, though, it'll help you start looking at things in a different way. Rather than pointing fingers, it's about how can we heal from this? Because really that's the whole goal, is healing. We're not trying to solve anything, we're just trying to heal. So here's our first activity. So I will break us into groups here in a little bit. Your goal in your groups, so you're going to identify what a healthy and appropriate relationship looks like, sounds like, feels like. What are the barriers that get in the way of building those relationships in our community? So whatever that community is, whether it's the church, whether it's the small communities that we have or any other groups that we're a part of. And then ultimately, how can we overcome those barriers to have these healthy, appropriate relationships? So 3 parts. What do healthier relationships look like, sound like, feel like? What are the barriers, and how can we overcome those barriers? So I'm going to break us into groups. Welcome back, everybody.
Hello.
But I peered into your rooms quickly. Some I had a little bit longer of a conversation than others, but I got my job done. So my group 1 is going to be Russ presenting to us. Russ, what did your group say about relationships, barriers, and overcoming barriers?
Well, a lot of healthy relationships is one that had mutual caring, so communication back and forth, confidence in sharing, so each party is confident in being able to share things, respectful and non-judgmental. Barriers to this be one of the things we talked about quite a lot is if there's a hierarchy of power, how do you deal with a hierarchy of power in a workplace, say, or any place else someone has more, they're in a position above you, or it could be in a more personal thing where the person is egocentric and they just have the kind of personality that's more powerful than the other person. So when there's a hierarchy of power, that could contaminate a relationship if someone can't feel like they can share or feel like they can fix any problems because of that hierarchy. To overcome the barriers, we talked about patience, acceptance, listening, and one thing that we talked more extensively about along with the hierarchy of power was modeling caring behaviors. So you as the participant in that model a behavior that maybe could impact a change even though there might be an imbalance in the hierarchy of power.
Perfect. I have a lot to say, but I won't say anything until I get questions, but that's really good stuff. Room 2, I have Julie. Julie is presenting to us.
A healthy relationship is one where you can share whatever your opinion is it's respectful, it's safe. Things that get in the way might be a bad, you need to be right. Things to overcome it. Listening is a gift you can give to others. Stepping back, what does the other person need? And from Judy, my favorite, I'm going to do the small things I can do with great love.
Mm.
Love it.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And my group 3, I have Connie as the leader.
Oh, okay. So talking about healthy relationship, we had some of the same things like respect and listening, safe. The big one that I thought of that came out in our group was also trust, that you have trust in them. So I think that's one. I talked a little bit about what does it sound like, or what I think look like is sometimes that body language that you're giving to others, can tell you for that healthy relationship. The body language is very important. Overcoming barriers. Talked again about listening, coming over that, but, betraying that confidence is one that I haven't heard, is when that confidence that you have in someone and they betray that on that. Someone also brought up about sometimes you know too much about someone, and that can be a barrier. And then to overcome that, maybe stepping back. Sometimes you just have to step back.
A lot of common threads.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have room 4. Finally, we have Terry.
I don't like being last because everything's been said, but one of the things we talked about again was trusting, be trusting of others, be able to give and take and put yourself out there. Some of the barriers we talked about are past baggage, along with a lot of the other ones that you said, and how to overcome them. The first thing we said was that it takes time to build a relationship, and sometimes we want to rush things, and sometimes you have to just let it go. And the other thing we mentioned was that you don't have to think that every relationship is going to be healthy. Some of them you can't make it healthy, but you get along as best you can. So they can't all be healthy. Otherwise, we agree with everything you said.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I heard in there that is very important to any relationship, and especially when you're being restorative, is vulnerability. If you're not willing to be vulnerable yourself, how can you expect somebody else to be vulnerable with you? I can't tell you how many times I heard doing counseling that if I'm not willing to share any piece of me, why should I share the deepest parts of me with you? So that piece of vulnerability is an important aspect in any relationship. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I think you put yourself out there, but to me, that's vulnerability. And so I just wanted to highlight that because you have so many threads that are weaved in there from all of you, like we were all in a big group, that vulnerability piece I just want to highlight, just because I think a lot of times, especially as a male, growing up in our times with my kids, I try to show them a little more vulnerability than I probably would in normal circumstances, because I want them to understand how valuable it is for a male, especially, to have that piece and show them that there's power in that in itself. So that's just a key part of this restorative process. So good job. Does anybody else want to add anything final? Terry's group talked about this. Sometimes there can't be a healthy relationship. And I shared in there that I have a relationship with my brother. We used to be very close. And I've since had to put some healthy boundaries up with him because it's very toxic. And in those circumstances, you just have to say, I'm not sure if we'll ever get there. We'll still have attempts towards healing and we'll still work on it. But in reality, sometimes we just have to understand that not all relationships are healthy, and we have to know what barriers or walls to put up in order to protect other things, including yourself. So the social discipline, when I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again, because I'm going to put that up, because we're going to do a lot of little activities tonight. So here's that social discipline window again. So
we
you
don't
see it in the 2 box.
Not shared yet.
We don't see it.
It's not sharing? Try it again. Share.
Da, da, da.
Can you see that now?
Yep.
Yes.
Fantastic. So the 2 box is the punitive box. That's where we do things to people. Oftentimes people in authority, of course, are telling you what's going to happen. The not box is where you're throwing the hands back, like Sally demonstrated earlier. The 4 box, human services, teachers oftentimes get into those careers. Parents, young parents oftentimes want to do it for the children or for people because they want to be helpful. The problem with that box is if we do that too much, it becomes enabling behaviors. And so those behaviors never change. So that one especially we've got to be very aware of, because we don't want behaviors to continue to rear our heads around. So the with box, which is the restorative, again, is where we're trying to get to 80% of the time as we're navigating through. So even if we start in the 2 box, we're still ultimately trying to get to the with box. So safety issues, I'm still going to try to get to the with box at a later time with that person. So we're going to break into groups again. And I had somebody say that they wish they had these questions prior. So Sue, I think for next week, I'm going to try to send these to you email wise.
Okay.
So then people have them in front of them rather than disappearing when we go and break into groups.
Good idea.
So I apologize that I didn't think ahead about that on this, and we'll get it taken care of for next week. So what I want you to think about is really when a person of authority treated you restoratively in life, anybody throughout any part of your life, I want you to think what that experience was like for you. And then what made it restorative? And then what can you take to be more purposeful in your own practice of being restorative as somebody? So a person of authority treated you restoratively. What was that experience like? And what made it restorative? And then what can you take from it? Just going to give a few seconds so you can write it down or take any quick notes that you might, take a picture of it with your phone. Any of that today, and then next week we'll take care of it on email. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing so we can break into our groups. Welcome back.
And then we're the first ones back.
We are the first ones back.
We struggled
with this one, so we're going to listen to everyone else.
Well, I'm going to do a little more talking than anybody else on this one. We're not each going to share.
Good.
I'm glad you struggled with it, because you should struggle with it.
We could come up with all sorts of negatives.
Well, and most people aren't experiencing a whole bunch of restorative things that are happening, especially from people of authority. Systems, especially system-involved things, are going to have less likelihood of a restorative approach, because when they're bigger systems and they're the way they've been done for centuries, they tend to just continue to be that way for centuries. And so it's not until we can break some cycles that that changes. I do this one because positions of authority mean something to every one of us. There's always going to be a connection to that. Usually bosses or parents or grandparents, all positions of authority tend to have power involved in that.
Mhm.
So the reason I use positions of authority is because it's less likely for people that want that power and that title means something to them of being restored. So if you've struggled with it, there is a reason behind that. It's because I set you up for that. However, I did hear a couple examples that there were some really good people talking about either a principal treating them restorative, making them feel like their voice mattered so they can make decisions together to make change for the good rather than, no, this is the way I need you to do it. And that's really the idea behind restorative, is that you have a voice, that you feel connected and you're part of something. So if you're in a position of authority, my question would be for you, do you want to be a boss or do you want to be a leader? Bosses tend to lead with a strong fist. Leaders tend to allow their teams and people to be involved, and that's restorative. So I don't need everybody to share on this one. I did set you up for that on purpose because it gets you to start thinking about how we start treating people on the power differential. And that's an important thing with restorative. And the whole idea with restorative is to take that power differential and bring it more here. So it's a fair process in everything that we do. Sorry, I set you up for failure, guys.
You made us vulnerable. We had to tell stories.
Well, that's the idea, isn't it? So here's a quick thing that we're going to do together. And just shout it out if you know. So what box are you operating in? If a person, student, young person, you tell them, what am I operating out of if I'm telling them to sit down and shut up?
Two.
You really only have to do it if you want to.
Not.
No.
Not.
I heard not, and then I heard something else. Was it?
Permissive.
Permissive, I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Oh, it's four.
So somebody say the 4 box?
Yeah, the 4.
So you really only have to do it if you want to. Are you helping them do something?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so that one is really the not box. That's the, like, I really don't care. You can do it if you want to. I don't care what you do, sort it out yourself.
Not.
Yeah, I would say not.
Feels not.
How are you aware? Oh. And then the last one, how you're aware of the expectations in this class. How can I support you in reaching them?
With.
How often my son hears you're aware of the expectations in this house. So how can I help you reach them? So again, the central idea is fair process, right? We as adults are going to be more likely and cooperative if we feel like we're a part of something and we feel like our voice is heard. So when we're dealing with elderly and younger people, their voices start to wane too. So we have to be very aware of that power differential when we're working with different individuals in our life. And so whether they themselves win or lose by the systems, when fair process is observed, things are going to go a lot more smooth and easy. The 3 principles are engagement, explanation, and expectation clarity. So the engagement is obviously we're doing this together. That's the engagement piece. The explanation comes where if there's, for instance, if there's harm caused, rather than working towards a common goal, if there's harm caused, I'm going to ask you first, from your viewpoint, what happened in the situation. And then I'm going to share from my viewpoint what I think or saw happen in the situation. to then come together at the end and say, now we've talked this out. Now we've explained this whole situation. Now we've talked about how we could potentially heal from this. This is the expectation moving forward together. Is that what you understood too? So then you can make for sure that you're right there. I'm telling you, I have to do this all the time with a 14-year-old at home. What did you hear the expectation was? So then he has to repeat it to me. And then 90% of the time, we have to go into that clarity and talk about it again to say, well, that's partially true. This is another piece that was missing. So all three of these are very important in the FAIR process because it's a total circle for communication. Engagement, explanation, expectation, clarity. So look, FAIR process isn't trying to get a consensus. It's not about harmony. That's not what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to give people a voice. I've said it time and time again at Lighthouse, if I give a consequence in the to box, the same consequence I could give in the with box is going to be received a whole lot better because the student or whoever I'm working with was a part of the whole process, had their opportunity to share their voice and what happened through their eyes. Same consequence, but people are walking away happy. And that's what this is about. It's not making for sure that we're trying to create consensus and decision-making. It's not about democracy. It's just giving voices. Because when it's all said and done at Lighthouse as the leader, I love my team giving the input. It's very important for us when making decisions. But when it's all said and done, I have to make the decision at the end of the day. And so I need to make for sure I'm a clear leader when it comes to that too, while giving my staff a voice in those. And it's, again, leaders not forfeiting the responsibility to make the decisions. And we're not looking for compromise either. So what it does is knowledge sharing, cooperation that's voluntary, goes beyond duty and drives the performance. And the drives the performance sounds like a business, but what we're really trying to do is get to the end of this discussion and get to a healing point in life. And that really is performance. In relationships, we're looking for the least resisted path to get somewhere together, whether that's friendship or significant other in our lives. We're trying to get places in life together. And so we want to make for sure that that's driving performance through FAIR process, feeling like you care, that I care about you and your voice matters. So the last thing we're going to do together as a group, instead of going into small groups, is we're going to define what affect, feelings, and emotions are. So let's start with affect. What is a definition of affect?
Stimulus and response.
What's that?
Yeah, you have a stimulus and you have the affect is the response to a stimulus.
It's actually a pretty good definition. So not only is it a response to a stimulus, it's something we generally can't control. Affect is an initial response to a stimulus that happens, right? Something that happens to us. As a counselor, when I'm counseling somebody and there's something happening, there's a significant event that happened that should have an emotional response, but we call it flat affect. There's nothing there. That's where we get a little worried. So yes, affect is that initial response to something happening that you can't control. So when I get mad, my face gets red. I can't control that. It just happens. What about feelings then? What are feelings?
Emotions.
No, that's something else.
That's the next one. Okay. Feelings.
You know your face is getting red.
No, most of the time I don't, though.
Don't? Oh, gosh.
My face doesn't get red very often anymore. It used to all the time. So these are important to understand because as we're dealing with people, we need to know the difference between these. So a feeling is something that happens within inside of us. It's not present to the people outside. So they can't tell how we're feeling.
Right.
So it's an emotion or it's something that happens within. So an emotion is now what you do in response to that feeling. That is your outward expression of the feeling you have inside. However, sometimes emotions don't match up with feelings. Sometimes we have these defense mechanisms that get in the way. For instance, I have a kid that comes into Lighthouse, just finds out his mom died and he's laughing. Do I really think he thinks that's funny? No, he doesn't want to be vulnerable and show somebody the real emotions that he has inside. So we have to take the time to really drill down to allow people to express themselves in a safe way. So affect is the initial response that we have no control over typically. Feelings are within ourselves that other people can't see. And then the emotions are the outward expression of those feelings that sometimes don't match up. So we need to drill down and really ask more questions.
So Bill, would it also be with restorative then, when the emotion part, I'm thinking of that child, you also then have to be not quick to judge the emotion. You have to think about it, because I was thinking about, I have a brother that kind of would maybe do the same thing, like death. Yep. He would laugh because he's uncomfortable and he doesn't know what to do. It's not so much hiding, but it's more like, well, I'm not really what to do right now.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's what we need to be aware of when we're working with other people, especially people that we think we have relationships with, family members, friends, significant others. We should be evaluating that rather than judging that and going, oh, well, you know, we should be asking questions and really doing it in a loving, caring way. Absolutely. So guess what? We're at homework time.
Ooh.
So this is a phrase that I picked up quite a few years ago. Actually, I think close to the beginning of my marriage with Michelle, is shimly. Shimly is see how much I love you. So you're going to do 2 acts. One in the morning, and I want it in the morning when you wake up. I would like you to do one towards yourself. See how much you love yourself, because you need to make for sure that your self-care is the pinnacle, because you have to be the best. And people get in line to tear you down in life. So you need to start your day with being your best friend. So I want you to do one for you, and then I'd like you to do one for another person throughout the day. Anybody. And it could be as simple as putting that little shimly on a mirror just so they can see it. It doesn't have to be monumental. It's just something simple. I'm not looking for you guys to go out to change the world or save the world necessarily. Just something simple. A loving, caring act. See how much I love you. Okay? That's your homework. That's it.
Wow. So it's just an act of kindness.
An act of love.
Oh, what's the difference?
Well, because I think we can be kind and sometimes not be loving.
I'm going to have to think about that.
Okay. I look forward to it. Because to be honest with you, I think there are a lot of people that walk through the world that are kind to people, but would rather not be around them. Like there are people on the earth that do not like to be around homeless people. So they'll be kind to them, but they're definitely not loving towards them. And so that I think is the difference between kind and loving.
Okay.
Any other final questions? Because we are there. I will send Sue everything for next week so you can have it prior to our meeting on Monday. Hearing not a lot of people asking questions. Sue, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, just will you be also sending the PDF of the slides for today?
Always for you.
Perfect. 'Cause I like having them, even if nobody else does. It's all about me. No, I think my only final thoughts are, again, thank you for being a part of this. I think we're having great conversations. I'm learning a lot, and I hope you are too. So practice this assignment. You might be surprised at how different you feel about yourself after a week of doing this. And we'll be back next Monday night at 7 o'clock. And I imagine we'll spend a few minutes debriefing kind of how we did this week with all this. And we'll dive into session 3. So thank you for joining us. And again, thank you, Bill. This is great.